I am with my friend Logan today, Logan Steiner. I'm so excited to connect with you. You have so much going on with a new book that we'll be talking about as a new author and your fertility story, which I'm so excited to share and just want to welcome you here. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm so happy to be here, Lisa.
Oh, well, when I learned of your story and you have so much to share on this that I've never had a conversation with anyone about someone who had entered early menopause or nearing that. And this is something that I am really grateful for you just kind of opening up and sharing about like your fertility story. And here on this podcast, we have those kind of challenging conversations. And I just want to open it up to you because you made a really tough decision with you and your husband to freeze your eggs at an early age and how that's led to your beautiful family. And so many decisions go into this process, like
They do.
how you even navigated through that. And maybe, just sharing a bit of your story, which I know a bit of, but I'd love for you to kind of open up and share wherever you'd like to.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it has been quite a journey.
Yeah.
Really, 7 years ago or so is when it started. And
Mhm.
I'm really grateful for my OBGYN who recognized in, taking down background information. She asked when my mom went through menopause, and it was in her early 40s. And
Mhm.
that's quite a bit earlier than the norm. And she said, based on that, she'd recommend that I get fertility testing. And at the time I was 33, to see where my numbers were, because, premenopause starts many years before
Mhm.
menopause. And once premenopause starts, it's very difficult to conceive. And so even though I was at a time when most people don't have to worry quite so much about fertility, she recommended that I do get tested. And at that time, I had been with my husband for quite a while since college,
Mhm.
but we didn't think that we wanted to have kids. We hadn't, ruled it out, but we had been ruminating, soul searching for years on the question. And at that point, we were leaning toward not having children. And so it was a really tough call to kind of go ahead with medical testing and that
Mhm.
inquiry when we weren't sure that it was a place that we would want to eventually go in our lives, but we did. And I'm really grateful. The tests themselves were illuminating. And I, got results. My hormone levels were, um, you know, basically indicated that I would go through menopause early, like my mom. And that the doctor put it to me at the fertility clinic in pretty stark terms that it was kind of now or never in terms
Ah,
of preserving this option. So I was just faced at that so many people are faced with at a little bit younger age.
yeah. How old were
And
you at that time? Were you early 30s?
33,
33. Okay.
33.
Wow.
And so, and I think there was so much trusting of my intuition along the way, but there were moments, and that was one of them, where I had unexpected emotional responses. And when I found out those numbers, I had a strong, a strong emotional response. I was sad and also pulled to do something, to take that step, even though, like I said, we were leaning toward not having children at that point. And that told me something. And so
Mm.
we decided to go ahead with creating embryo. So I did an egg retrieval. I was
Mhm.
on a very, very high hormone regimen right from the start. And that was because of my levels. My doctor thought that I probably wouldn't have that many follicles, that it would take a lot of hormones to get
Mm.
me to have the right number of, follicles to have enough eggs to kind of make the whole thing work. So it was intense. I just remember comparing to some other friends who were going through the freezing process, and I
Mhm.
had, like, 3 times the hormone levels of some
Oh
of
my
them in terms of the
gosh.
amount of extra the number of shots per day.
Oh my
And but it, you know, I was able to get, I think it was 11 eggs that ended up in two genetically viable embryos.
Okay.
And I think, I really credit the protocol. I think that it worked. I
Yeah.
remember by the end, I was basically waddling around. I was so physically uncomfortable.
Because your ovaries had just
Ovaries
expanded
were
so
so
much, right?
swollen.
Yeah. Oh
It
my
was
God.
amazing. But then we went through that process and created embryos, got a lot of information along the way about, our own genetic testing that I thought was really valuable, and then got to the point of these two embryos. And I still remember the call from the embryologist. I was in my big law firm office with glass walls and not a lot of privacy. And I got this call that we had two embryos and that they were both female.
Mm.
And something about, I just got chilled even thinking about it now. Something
Mm.
about that, I just really, it it struck me emotionally. I just started sobbing in my law office, and I felt this sense of, okay, it didn't change the fact that I didn't feel ready right then, but I felt this pull that was such an intuitive pull of, someday I may get there, and that this is really telling me that this might be something I really want someday. And I'm so grateful.
Mm.
Fast forward several years later, my husband and I had moved from Chicago to Denver,
Mhm.
and made this big move largely for quality of life reasons
Mhm.
pre-COVID. A move that a lot of folks made during COVID. We made a little bit before, really wanting more outdoor time and
Mhm.
being closer to some friends and family. And we made this move, and we were in a house instead of a tiny condo. And, it felt so much opened up, I think, for us in terms of what we were really wanting in life, and having
Mhm.
space in our lives where we could really visualize having a baby. And it was a very gradual shift. And I don't think we ever got to a point where it was oh, yes, we profoundly know that we want this. But there was a real internal shift that happened once we moved to Denver. And as we kept sorting through it, feeling through it, both of us. And
Mhm.
we got to the point in early 2020 where we decided we wanted to go ahead, and in kind of the uncertainty still, but we're ready to welcome the possibility of a baby. And we at first tried without the embryos. That was something my
Mhm.
husband wanted to do. I was already getting cues from my body that I was, not in high fertility land. But, I got off birth control for the first time in many years. And so it was definitely,
Yeah.
it was a hard sort to do that. We did. I actually got pregnant naturally about
Oh.
6 months into trying, and had a miscarriage soon after that was a really painful, like way more emotional experience than I expected. The level of
Mm.
attachment to that embryo,
Mm.
it was really a strong internal um,
Mm.
feeling. And the amount of story that I had around this baby just being pregnant I found out at 11 weeks that
Mm.
um, it had been a miscarriage at about 8 weeks, but didn't find out until I was kind of close to that first trimester mark. And you just tell yourself that there's so much story around the due date and what that baby will be. And
Mm.
it really was such a huge pain. And
Mm.
my partner Dave and I both felt it really strongly. And
Mm.
that was such a teacher too. I will always hold that pregnancy as such a gift
Mm.
in all that it taught me, and taught David too, about what we really wanted, and that we really did want to keep going with this
Mhm.
process. And that life, for as long as it was in the world, was just a huge gift to us. And And it took my body a really long time to recover from that. I was bleeding for about 12 weeks, just like continually after, which I think is unusual, but I really tried to hold like my body's my body's going through something at the end of that, and that there was a lot to sort through, and and let my body kind of take that time. And a few months later, after I felt like, okay, I've really I'm feeling healed, like I'm feeling like my body has gone through the process that it needed
Mhm.
to.
Mhm.
I then felt really strongly that I wanted to go to one of the embryos that I felt
Mhm.
such an emotional pull toward years before. And
Mhm.
I, at that point, David was really on board, and we did that. So we moved the embryos out here from the storage place in Indiana. They
Mm.
survived the trip,
Oh
and
my God.
we
Yeah,
we
because this is, I
transferred.
mean, you were
Yeah.
33 when you decided to freeze your eggs, right? And how many years
Yes.
later again did you decide to use your
This
embryo?
was 37.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
yeah, so about 4 years later.
Take us
And
back to that because I mean, gosh, just getting that diagnosis. I know your mom went through early menopause, right? And that's
yes,
when they detected it for you. And like, how did you feel? Because I think you had shared with me that you weren't sure you maybe even wanted to have children, right? But that moment you
yeah,
and your husband decided, like, you know, we are going to go through this process. You made the decision. Was it just for kind of what for potential down the road? You just thought maybe one day we'll change our mind and maybe we'll want a family?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was that potential. And I felt really sad and moved by finding out what my numbers were. I mean,
Oh.
one way it's just they're just numbers, but I had this kind of surprising emotional reaction in myself where I found that to be really telling.
Hmm.
And because of that, I think we might have hemmed and hawed longer or put it off longer, because we were in that kind of place of thinking we didn't want kids. If I
Mhm.
hadn't had that strong emotional pull, and
Okay.
I just trusted that there was something there, and so we went forward pretty quickly. We're also, my husband's an economist. He loves
Uh-huh.
options, and so I do think for on his in his kind of rational
Yeah.
brain, there was an appeal to that too, like keeping those options there.
And you're a
But it
lawyer,
is,
so right?
and I'm
Like
a
you're both like
lawyer. Yes. Yeah, there
Mhm.
was definitely that analytical part of both of us where this
Mhm.
felt like, you know, okay, it's a lot of money, but we want to prioritize,
Mhm.
it's a life possibility. We don't know our future selves. There was sort of that rational talk, and then there was this real emotional feeling that
Mhm.
I had, and that's really what got us there. But it was a lot to
Mhm.
sort through at a time when a lot of friends were feeling like they weren't there yet in terms of, reckoning with potential menopause or their fertility ending. I
Wow.
think it's a conversation I'm now having with a lot of friends that just wasn't it
Mhm.
wasn't being had a lot back then.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you have your embryos moved to Colorado and you decide to move forward with one of your embryos, right?
We did. So we implanted one of our two embryos, and that embryo is now our daughter. And it was not a straightforward process along
It
the way.
wasn't. Oh my.
No, it was a very touch and go process, I would say. It was December of 2020 when we did the implantation, and I just remember 'cause that month is just, it was still kind of the dark time of COVID,
Mm.
such a dark month of the year. We did the implantation, and all of my early, um, again, with, the numbers leading me places. So all of my early, levels were indicated that I probably had an ectopic pregnancy. So, they test for HCG and they test for it doubling, and my
Mhm.
HCG was not doubling. It wasn't even close to that. And it was very, very low to begin with. And then it wasn't doubling in all of those subsequent blood tests. And so they
Mm.
thought, but it was going up, which indicates a pregnancy. So they, and this is at a top fertility clinic here in Denver, and they thought that it was almost certainly an ectopic pregnancy and wouldn't be viable. And I had this conversation, it was kind of close to Christmas, with the doctor, who said, at this point, like, this would be a medical miracle to go forward. I think you could go off the supporting hormones, because I was doing, estrogen, progesterone patches, and said, like, I just don't think, like, that we've just never seen results like this lead to a viable pregnancy. So
Oh
you
my
can
God.
go off. And I tell this story, it's hard, because I believe and trust so much in science. And I think without science, none of this would have come to be. I'm so grateful for it. And also, not to say that most people shouldn't trust the numbers. I think in the vast majority of times, that's really good data. What happened in my case, I think, was a really rare kind of event. And basically, I had this great conversation with a friend who had been through IVF, like 6 implantations, and a friend suggested I talk to her right when I was at the point of, like, taking off the patches and basically calling this, unsuccessful. And she said, there's so much they don't know about early pregnancy still. And I've heard, story, like, I've seen strange things happen. I would kind of trust your intuition here. And my intuition was that, like, this implantation had worked. I just had that sense. I can't explain it. Beyond really a gut feeling. And so I kept the patches on, and we went in for an ultrasound where they were expecting to find a pregnancy in my fallopian tubes, an ectopic pregnancy. And let's see, I mean, the first ultrasound, they saw nothing. And then I came back a week later for a confirming ultrasound, and they basically saw a gestation, a yolk sac with a fetal pole. And it was just dating a week behind what they thought it would be. And they had never seen that before, and apparently in the history of the clinic. And then they just kind of monitored me closely through that whole first trimester. Each time I went in, they basically said, we still don't think this is probably going to work.
And how did
But,
they determine
the
that it
next
was
week we heard a heartbeat. It just kept growing.
amazing?
So
I mean, why would they have thought an ectopic pregnancy again? From your numbers? They thought
from
your
the
numbers?
HCG, I guess when the HCG goes up but doesn't double, that's when they really suspect an ectopic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So every week you're just moving along, doing your patches and
Yeah. And I just kept going with it. And, that I remember so well the week that we heard the heartbeat. That was, that's when I really started to trust and lose some of that doubt. And, that had really kept me, as much as I was, like, trying to hold on to hope and continue to kind of keep the faith, my whole rational brain was saying, like, listen to the doctors, like, you're holding on to this for, like, this is, like, defying rationality, and you're just kidding yourself here. And so but hearing the heartbeat was really a hugely moving moment. And
oh my goodness.
and then it just kept kind of going, and finally at the end of the first trimester, they said, okay, like, now, this embryo has really grown on its path. It's just continued to date a week behind. I think probably it was a late implantation, and I think late implantations just don't really happen that often in IVF.
Wow.
But apparently can happen every once in a while.
That
And
is so incredible.
yeah.
I truly appreciate you sharing just so much that you were listening to your intuition. And there's a lot of lessons for anyone going through this, just trusting in your body. And you had this pulling in this call to, to keep holding on. Do you have any thoughts more on that? For women who are in that waiting period, just like, it is so important to listen
It
to that inner
is.
knowing.
It's important to listen to that inner knowing. And it's just excruciating. I mean, I can still put myself so quickly back to those weeks of waiting and waiting. And, most women, in early pregnancy who don't go through IVF, they don't get all this data. It's just so hard to have all that data,
Mm,
and to, women who have gone through it time and time again, I can't speak to that experience. I just feel
mhm,
the pain of that. And I know friends who have gone through it.
mhm.
I think just, yeah, it's trusting your intuition. It's all the beautiful work you do, Lisa. There's trusting, listening to the doctors, and also listening, you know, to what your body and what your gut is telling you.
Mhm.
And um, I think they're both equally important. And sometimes they'll be at odds, and then it's just this really tough feeling through process. But I think, I was just I'm so grateful that I kept the faith, the kind of trust through that process that I did, thinking about who knows what would have happened if I'd, taken the patches off. But, looking
Mm,
at my daughter today, it's just, it feels, I don't
wow.
know. It's so incredible to think that we had all this doubt early on, and now here she is. And yeah,
It is miraculous. We do need the science, and then we do trust, the inner part of
right,
ourselves, our soul, and
right.
how old is your daughter today?
She is almost 21 months. She
Okay.
is,
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
so a little under 2, which is a really
Wow.
fun age.
Oh yes. I think every age is just gets better and better. And something you and I share. I mean, I want to jump into your book. And when I had an infant in my arms, and I decided, I felt called to write a book about our story through fertility. And yours is not about fertility, but writing with a young child. Is that when you decided to embark on becoming an author as a new mom? Or how old were you? Like, what
I,
age was your little one when you decided to write a book?
yeah, it was actually before Noah that I
Was
started
it?
writing.
Okay.
So this has been a
Oh,
long journey for me.
okay. Yes. I want you to share all about, because you're in the book launch mode right now, which
I
we'll be releasing
am
this hopefully the end of May. And this is when you're going to be launching your book, right? May 30th,
May 30th. Yes, May 30th.
called After
And
Anne. And
the
I'm so excited to have you on because
Yes,
what a
yes,
dream.
it's
I
such
mean,
an exciting season that has been so long in the making. I so this is My book is historical fiction based on the life of Lucy Maud Montgomery, who's the author of Anne of Green Gables, this,
mhm,
fascinating, complex Canadian woman who wrote books that I love and have loved my whole life. And it's fiction, so it's very much based on the historical record, but with the benefit of dialogue and kind of telling
mhm,
different time periods of her life. I
mhm.
chose time periods that I thought would be most significant. I'm always fascinated with the idea of at the end of your life, what times of your life will really stand out. And so
Wow.
chose the parts of this book to tell, thinking about that from, she went by Maud, from Maud's perspective. But
Mhm.
it's just been such a journey. I've wanted to write fiction since I was little, like a 10-year-old old.
Oh.
And, I went this law route. I wanted to have a kind of stable, steady, supportive career with, creativity on the side. And so
Mm,
my creativity got derailed for a number of years as I was starting out in law. And then um, I started, it was actually losing my brother. So it was a really
mm,
terrible, um, kind of the deepest pain I've ever been in. Losing my brother unexpectedly was what eventually made me kind of realize how finite life is, and that I didn't want to put this off any longer. It just like made me really feel that lesson of we don't know how much time we have.
mm,
And so I wanted to write about the life of a creator because I just find those stories so inspiring personally. I like to
mm,
know kind of what the people who wrote books or made art that I find the most moving, like what they went through, not just what their successes were, but what they really
mm,
struggled with. I have found those stories to be so impactful. And so I wanted
mm.
to tell one of those in my first book. but it was this long journey of research and then long
Wow.
journey of writing alongside my law career. And so
How many
it
years
has
before you
been,
had your child did you start when you had this dream to write this book?
so it was actually the same summer that we froze embryos.
Was it
Uh,
really?
yes. So it has been 8 years now. It is, when I
Wow.
started the research, it was that same summer. And I think to me that was always the thing that a hang up that I had too. I wanted to write a novel before I had a baby because I was so scared that having a baby would derail all of my
Oh,
creative energy and that
oh.
I just would never get it off the ground. And so I had that dream. And
Mm,
then, fast forward a number of years, I put so much into this book. There were many iterations of getting an agent, getting a publisher,
mm.
writing it, rewriting it, that took a long time. And it was right after having Noah that I got the call that the book had been picked up
That's
by
amazing.
HarperCollins, which was such a dream. But I had given up at that point that this would ever happen. And I think it
Oh,
was
wow.
just like that, the universe telling me,
Well, like the power of
it
surrender,
can't
right?
all
You like
happen
let go,
according
throw
to
up
your
my hands.
plan.
Oh my
Right. Yes, yes. It was
wow.
like, no, this, and teaching me that like it's, things don't have to happen in a particular order. Like that was this book's time. I really hold that like I needed to go through and work through everything I did. And I have found it that having a baby, it sounds like for you too, has been way more supportive of creativity than I thought it would. Like it's just opened me up in so many
Oh
ways and
my
made me
God, for
work
sure.
faster. And yeah,
For sure. So you're not practicing law anymore, is that correct?
I am still.
Oh, you are still practicing law. Okay, so
Yes.
I love it. And we're just all multifaceted, like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Yes.
working in law,
Balancing
writing,
act.
mother. That's amazing. Yeah, I was reading some of your reviews. It's just so amazing. So it's like this book, will break your heart, make you smile, and remind you what is important in life. Um, and how you paint this picture, there's a contrast, right, between the author's life and Anne of Green Gables. And can you share a little bit about just some of your, I don't know if you can share any like key takeaways of like just what it was like writing this book and kind of showcasing both sides of this star in the books, Anne of Green Gables, and then the author.
Yes. Yes. There is absolutely a contrast,
Mm,
and in some ways resembles Maud. Maud had this kind of wild imagination always,
mm,
huge, big dreams always. She was, you know, very verbose herself. It had the kind of precociousness that I
mm,
love in Anne, so many love in Anne, and this creative drive that, I mean, Anne herself ended up marrying, having a number of kids, and not actually
mm.
kind of pursuing that creative drive. Maud pursued it her whole life. I mean, she wrote 20 novels, many,
Wow.
many short stories, poems, was just this prolific writer. And,
Mm,
but I think unlike, the Anne in her fiction, where there are these sort of perpetual happy endings and there's
mm,
struggle, but the stories are really always kind of ending on an uplifting note, which I think was a great
mm,
outlet for Maud. Maud went through so much in her life, as we all do.
mhm,
And her real life was, she lost her mom when she was 21 months old, her dad when she was in her 20s. Her dad left
mm,
her with her mom's parents to raise her, and they were these kind of old curmudgeonly
mm,
characters who,
mhm,
didn't think they were going to have to raise any more kids. They raised their own kids. And so they were really, I think, hard-edged figures that
mm,
she butted up against and didn't really support her dreams.
mm,
And then, she lost her closest friend in midlife. Her husband, suffered from mental illness that really
mm,
onset soon after she lost her closest friend and cousin. Um, and her oldest son had mental health struggles too. And all of that, I think at the time in rural Canada, there was so much that was kept under wraps, so much that was so hard to share about those struggles. And
Mm,
she was a, really famous author in Canada at the time, kind of like the Mark Twain of the
yeah.
US in Canada. And so she was this public figure. And, I think she struggled so much with what to make public, what to keep private. And she ended up suffering alone a lot in her life. And that
Mm,
is, I felt the
mm,
pain of that so much. I have that tendency myself, and I'm always trying to it's
mm,
coax myself to open up more. And so there was so much in learning about Maud's story that just added more
mm,
appreciation for me to her fiction, which I've always loved.
mhm.
But it was one of those, like, it's like the ultimate example of the story of a creative life that is, it's like the work is even more inspiring when you know what the creator went through. And
Wow.
um, her life has just, I've spent now all these years with it. And it's each time that I went back into the book, each time I edited it, I would take some other like profound lesson for my own life that was so
Wow.
meaningful. So I'm so grateful for that.
I mean, an 8-year journey, right? Going deep and learning about her life. This was like early 1900s,
Yes.
right? When she was living. She was born in
Yeah.
1874.
1874.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
so, 100 and some years ago, so much was different, so much was the
Mhm.
same. I think
Mhm.
that I really hope readers now take a lot, as I did, that really applies to life now. And there's so much to be grateful for in terms of, modern approaches to mental health
Mm.
treatment, the approaches to medications, and then, modern norms around divorce. I just
Mm.
all of these things were in my mind as I was writing Maud's story, and gratitude for what we have now. Not to say that there aren't many problems
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
but it really it can be so interesting to look back at the life of a woman 100 years ago.
Yeah. I'm excited to read it. It'll be available. You said May 30th through HarperCollins. And for anyone that is a
Yes,
big
May
fan of Anne of
30th.
Green Gables, right? It's like this is a
Yes,
really
yes.
deep dive into the
Anne's
author.
voice appears in the book and in Maud's
Oh,
mind.
yeah.
And so there's some tastes of Anne throughout the book.
Did you see any parallels as reflecting back on like kind of your fertility story as you're writing? And just, I mean, gosh, I think of so many themes of, you're talking about kind of just the isolation, feeling alone, different mental challenges. I mean, we know fertility challenges often affect like our relationships and friendship. I mean, so many things
Yes.
in our life. Like I'm sure you saw a lot of threads between one's fertility challenge and then the author's
I
life.
did. I did.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the fertility journey, was a many, many years journey for me, and kind of about having patience and trusting my intuition at various times, and then this
Mm-hmm.
book journey, there was that parallel. And but I think, yeah, those being in those dark spaces, and what do you do with it, and how much to share? Because the answer isn't just share indiscriminately, right? And it's also
Right.
not keep it all inside.
Right.
And I think in a fertility journey in particular, it's so personal how much feels
Mm.
right to share and who to let in.
Yeah.
And so very much parallels there. There's,
Mm.
I don't think Maud's story gives any clear answers there. I think it just really shows that struggle of,
Mm.
you know, how much to share, and just, you know, how important it is, those really close confidants in life.
Yeah.
One of the things that moved me most about Maud's story is her losing that closest confidant in middle life. And
Mm.
think about my closest friends and how important they were for me in my fertility, the whole
Mm.
journey of getting to my daughter, and just that deep pain, and how important particular people who really understand us can be.
Wow. It's so good. Oh my gosh, you're helping so many people. And I just think like having been, when you discovered with your fertility challenge in your early 30s, like you're just helping so many to kind of get the information to help you move forward, right? If you have a desire, and maybe, not everyone knows if they want to have children or not, but just even having those options and staying
Right.
empowered, staying empowered on our path.
Staying empowered, and yes, the freezing process is a big undertaking, but just getting
Mhm.
the numbers, is just a blood draw. It's not that big of a process. And,
Mhm.
I do think that getting those numbers early, because for most people, the result would be that they wouldn't have to worry. Mine was, oh, yes, you'll
Mhm.
probably go through menopause early. And so you do need to think about this now. But for a lot of folks, it could be a huge relief to know, and the numbers can only tell you so much, but
Mhm.
to just stay empowered and stay in
Mhm.
charge of your own
Yeah, like
process, I think information is really helpful.
for sure. I mean, gosh, I just love that it helps us, being more open to the possibilities. We've talked about that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'm so glad that I stayed open to that possibility, even at an age where I
Mhm.
was thinking, I can't picture this at all in my tiny little apartment. Like I couldn't picture having a baby
No.
at that point in my life, like working crazy hours at the law firm. Um, but
Mm,
several years later, I really could, and I'm so grateful that I preserved that option.
for sure. And you still have, I think you said one embryo, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And that's such a
Oh,
personal decision,
it
when you're
is.
ready or what to do. And
Yeah, yeah,
I
it
mean, being
really
a lawyer, you
is.
understand it. We sign all the papers, right? There's so
Yes,
much that goes through this whole
yes.
process and
Oh,
fertility. Oh my gosh. But um, I'm just really excited to share your story with others and also just your book. I mean, congratulations. It's such an accomplishment. I mean, what a
thank you
journey.
so much. Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm so excited for it to finally make its way in the world. It's been such a long journey. The letting go is the big piece now, right? Which is
Right.
so much what it is to raise a baby too. Like just, letting go more and more and more as they grow up and become their own people. But
Mm,
I'm really in that feeling now of, oh my gosh, like there are final copies. I can't control what's gonna happen now. It's
right.
out of my I can't change anything at this
Mm,
point. And that's been a really, really hard adjustment for me. But a lot
oh,
of excitement too.
no, that is the key, right? Letting go. I mean, that is a huge key in life, I think. And the magic can
Mhm.
appear. And like you said, when you kind of throw up your hands and surrender to
Yeah.
what will be, I
Yes.
mean, I hope it reaches far and wide and all of the good things that are in store. Are you going to do a tour or anything like that? Or do you
I have
have a
some
desire?
events. I
Yeah.
do. I have, yes, and on my website, I've got kind of the list for people to look by. I have in Denver, Boston, Bay Area, Chicago, and then an event in Prince Edward Island that I'm so excited about
That'll
in
be
late August.
amazing.
So
Oh
kind
my
of throughout
gosh.
the summer, um, you know, one East Coast, one West Coast, Chicago, where I lived for a long time. So there events that will be really fun. They're all kind of speaking with other authors that are historical
Okay.
fiction authors. So I'm really excited to be able to be in conversation with them.
Amazing. I'll link all the information, but can you share your website with everyone here so they can follow you?
Sure, it's logansteiner.com. And that's LOGANSTEINER.com. And that has all the info there.
And your social media handles, I know Instagram. Want to share that?
Yes. Instagram, Logan and Steiner. And it's Anne without an E. I didn't have control over that. Unlike Anne of Green Gables, but Logan and Steiner on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter.
Okay, I'll link
I
everything below.
Wonderful.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Logan. I'm thrilled to have this conversation. Thank you so much for opening up your, sharing so vulnerably.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for creating the space for this. It's beautiful work you're doing.
Thank you. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Sounds good.